This is crazy HOA life. It started with a fence line and ended with a board meltdown. I am standing in my side yard in the drizzle, holding a phone with the recording light on, and Sandra Taylor is 3 feet from my face, screaming that I destroyed Quarry Ridge Community Association property, and that I will pay the fee. Then I will pay the fee about the fee. My name is not important. What matters is that I moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania 6 months ago for an IT compliance auditor job that runs background checks twice a year. I bought a house in a development where the committee micromanages fence styles like it is fine art, and I just pulled down a short section of rotted fence on my own property line to replace it. Sandra is the HOA records custodian. She wears a tiny body camera on her cardigan, and she forgets it records her too. Right now she is yelling that I need approvals that do not exist, then daring me to prove otherwise, and a landscaping contractor is pretending not to listen 10 feet away while trimming a hedge. I moved here because the job paid well, and the neighborhood looked quiet. The Quarry Ridge Community Association runs the development like a museum. Every fence panel has to match an approved style list. Every setback has an easement map. Every property line dispute gets a hearing. I thought I could stay under the radar, keep my record clean, do my work, maybe fix the back fence when it rotted through. The first sign of trouble was an email 2 weeks after I closed, telling me my mailbox post was half an inch too far forward, and I had 7 days to adjust it or face a $50 daily fine. I adjusted it. I thought that was the end. Then, the back fence started leaning. The wood was 20 years old, soft as cardboard, and one post had already snapped at ground level. I pulled the county permit rules. No permit needed for a fence replacement under 6 feet on a residential lot if it stays on the existing line. I checked my plat. The old fence sat exactly on the boundary. I sent a courtesy notice to the HOA on a Monday, certified mail, saying I would remove the damaged section on Saturday and reinstall new panels the following weekend. I kept a copy of the tracking receipt. I did not ask for permission because the covenants do not require it for in-kind replacement. I just wanted a paper trail. Sandra replied Thursday night with a 5-paragraph email claiming the fence was shared HOA infrastructure, that any removal required a design review, that I was in violation of Article 12, Section 4, which governs structural alterations, and that if I proceeded, I would be assessed an emergency complia NC fee of $200 plus a stop work penalty of $100 per day until I submitted plans. I read Article 12, Section 4. It covers additions and new construction. It says nothing about replacing a rotted fence on the same footprint. I replied with the covenant language and my permit research. She replied in all caps, except I am not allowed to write all caps, so I will say she replied in a very loud tone that I signed the covenants, now I live the covenants, and that I had been warned. I went ahead Saturday morning. The contractor I hired is a friend of a friend, does good work, does not care about HOA drama. We pulled 4 rotted panels and 2 broken posts. The dirt was wet from overnight rain. We stacked the old wood by the curb for bulk pickup. We set new post holes, braced them with gravel, and planned to pour concrete Monday and hang the panels Tuesday. It was clean, it was on my property, and every piece of old fence was mine to remove. I took pictures of every step. I had my phone in my chest pocket recording the whole time. Screen turned away, just the little red light showing. Sandra showed up at 11. She parked in front of my house, got out wearing her white cardigan and black visor, clipboard in a clear plastic sleeve, body camera clipped to her collar, and walked straight into my yard without asking. The landscaping contractor next door was edging the neighbor's driveway, and he stopped to watch. Sandra pointed at the post holes and said I was in violation, that I had removed HOA property without authorization, and that she was filing an emergency enforcement action. I said the fence was on my property line, the covenants allowed replacement, and I had sent written notice. She said the notice was insufficient. The design review committee had not approved the style, and I had 48 hours to restore the original fence or face a lien. I asked her to show me the rule. She said, "You signed the covenants, now you live the covenants," turned around and walked back to her car. I called my friend Marcus. Marcus is a practical property manager who knows HOA procedure and records requests inside and out. He has seen every trick. I told him what happened. He laughed and said Sandra was bluffing, that Quarry Ridge has a reputation for fake violations and document runarounds, and that I should file a records request immediately for any rule or meeting minute that proves the fence is association property. He said to send it certified, ask for a response in 10 business days per state law, and keep every receipt. I sent the request that afternoon. I also sent a second certified letter to the HOA board president summarizing the situation and asking for clarification on whether the fence replacement required approval. I made copies of everything. I know how compliance works. You build the paper trail before the fight starts. Monday morning, I got an email from Sandra saying my records request was received and would be processed within 30 days, that there was a $25 processing fee and that I should send a check. State law says 10 business days and no fee for simple document requests. I replied citing the statute. She replied that the fee covered labor and that Quarry Ridge policy allowed cost recovery. I forwarded the exchange to Marcus. He said to pay it, get the records, and file a complaint later if needed. I sent a check for $25, kept a copy of the front and back, and noted the date. The contractor and I poured concrete Monday afternoon. The posts set clean. We let them cure. Tuesday morning, I got a violation notice in the mail, dated the previous Friday, saying I had removed shared infrastructure, that the violation was severe, and that I owed a $200 emergency fee plus $100 per day starting Saturday. The math put me at $600. I took pictures of the envelope, the postmark, the notice. Then I got a second email from Sandra saying the Quarry Ridge gate access system was undergoing maintenance and my entry code had been temporarily suspended for non-compliance. I tried my code at the front gate that evening. It did not work. I had to follow another car in. I called the management company listed on the HOA website. The woman who answered said gate codes were managed by the board and she could not override it. I asked if there was a process for wrongful suspension. She said I should attend the next board meeting and bring it up during homeowner comments. The next meeting was 3 weeks away. I asked if there was an emergency contact. She said the board president was Sandra Taylor. I hung up and called Marcus again. He said this was retaliation, that gate access suspension for an unresolved dispute was likely a covenant violation itself, and that I should document every blocked entry and send another certified letter demanding restoration of access. I sent the letter Wednesday, kept the tracking, and started logging every time I had to tailgate through the gate. Wednesday afternoon, the contractor and I hung the new fence panels. They matched the old style exactly, same height, same picket spacing, same wood stain color. We used galvanized brackets and exterior screws. It looked clean. I took pictures of the finished fence from every angle, time-stamped. I sent a completion notice to the HOA with the pictures attached, certified mail, saying the work was done, the fence was code compliant, and I expected the violation to be cleared. I felt good for about an hour. Thursday morning, a tow truck showed up in my driveway. The driver knocked on my door and said he had an order to remove my vehicle for unpaid HOA fees. I said I had not received a final notice or a hearing. He showed me a work order on his phone. It listed my address, my car, and a note that said owner refused to comply. Authorization from Sandra Taylor. I stepped outside. Sandra was standing on the sidewalk with her clipboard and body camera, watching. The contractor next door was still trimming hedges, pretending not to listen. I told the driver I disputed the fees, that I had not been given due process, and that if he towed my car, I would file a police report for theft. The driver looked at Sandra. Sandra said the association had the right to enforce payment and that I could retrieve my car after paying the balance plus towing and storage fees. The driver looked uncomfortable. I pulled out my phone, turned the recording light on, held it chest high, and said I was documenting the situation and that I had certified mail receipts proving I had contested the fees in writing. The driver said he would call his dispatcher. He walked back to the truck. Sandra said, "You will pay the fee, then you will pay the fee about the fee," and smiled. The dispatcher came on speaker. The driver explained the situation. The dispatcher asked if there was a signed tow authorization from the property owner or a court order. The driver said the work order came from the HOA. The dispatcher said that was not sufficient without proof of a lien or a judgment, and that the company policy required documented authority to tow from private property. Sandra tried to talk over the operator, saying the covenants gave the association enforcement power. The dispatcher said she needed to fax proof of a recorded lien or the driver had to leave. Sandra said she would send it within the hour. The driver told me he would wait in the truck. I said that was fine and I would wait too. I stayed in my driveway with my phone recording. Sandra walked back to her car, got in, and sat there typing on her phone. 30 minutes later, the driver got another call. He hung up, started the truck, and left. No explanation. I watched Sandra drive away. I did not stop her because I wanted her on record. I checked my mailbox. There was a new notice saying the board would hold a special hearing on my violation the following Tuesday at 7 in the evening, and that failure to attend would result in a default judgment and immediate lien filing. I made a copy, noted the date and time, and sent a reply saying I would attend and I reserved the right to present evidence and witnesses. I called Marcus. He said to bring everything, printed and organized, and to stay calm no matter what Sandra said. He said he would come as my witness if I needed one. I said yes. I spent the weekend building a tabbed timeline with every notice, every certified mail receipt, every email, every picture of the fence work. I had a section for the covenant language, a section for the state records request statute, a section for the gate access suspension, a section for the tow truck incident. I put it all in a binder with a clear cover that showed the first page of the timeline, but no readable text on the tab labels. I labeled each exhibit with a number and a date. I practiced my presentation. I knew this hearing would either clear me or bury me, and my job does not tolerate liens or judgments. Tuesday afternoon, I got an email from Sandra saying the hearing location had changed from the clubhouse to her home office due to scheduling conflicts, and that the new address was attached. I forwarded it to Marcus. He called me immediately and said that was irregular, that HOA hearings were supposed to be in common areas with notice, and that holding it at her house gave her total control of the environment and the record. He said to reply asking if the hearing could be rescheduled at the clubhouse and to document the request. I sent the email. Sandra replied 10 minutes later saying the hearing would proceed as scheduled and that my objection was noted. Marcus said we should go anyway, record everything, and file a procedural complaint later if needed. I showed up at Sandra's house at 6:50. Marcus was already there, parked on the street. The house was a 2-story colonial with a perfect lawn and a Quarry Ridge Community Association sign in the flower bed. We walked to the front door. Sandra answered wearing her white cardigan, black visor, and body camera. She looked at Marcus and asked who he was. I said he was my witness. She said the hearing was for homeowners only. I said the covenants allowed representation and witnesses at enforcement hearings. She said this was an informal review, not a formal hearing, and that outside parties were not permitted. Marcus said he was a property management professional attending as an observer, and that excluding him could be considered a due process violation. Sandra stared at him for 5 seconds, then said he could sit in the corner and not speak. We went inside. The hearing room was her dining room. There was a folding table with 3 chairs on one side and 1 chair on the other. 2 other board members were already seated, both older, both looking uncomfortable. One was the treasurer, a man in his 60s with glasses. The other was the compliance officer, a woman in her 50s with a notebook. Sandra sat in the middle. She told me to sit across from them. Marcus sat in a chair by the wall. I put my binder on the table. Sandra started a recording app on her phone and said the hearing was now in session, that I was present to address violations of Covenant Article 12 and unpaid fees totaling $600, and that I had 10 minutes to present my defense. I opened my binder. I started with the timeline. I explained that I had sent written notice of the fence replacement, that the covenants did not require approval for in-kind replacement, that I had followed county permit rules, and that the fence was entirely on my property. I showed the certified mail receipts. I showed the covenant section that defined structural alterations. I showed pictures of the old rotted fence and the new matching fence. I said the violation notice was factually incorrect because I had not removed HOA property. Sandra interrupted and said the fence had been installed by the original developer as part of the common infrastructure, and that replacement required board approval regardless of the property line. I asked her to provide documentation. She said the records were being processed and would be available within 30 days. I said I had requested those records 2 weeks ago, paid the fee, and received no response. The treasurer looked at Sandra. Sandra said the request was in the queue. I pulled out the second tab. I showed the gate access suspension email. I said I had been locked out of the neighborhood for a week without a hearing, without notice, and in direct retaliation for contesting the fees. I said that was a breach of the covenants and possibly illegal. The compliance officer asked Sandra if she had authorized the suspension. Sandra said the suspension was automatic for accounts in arrears. I said I was not in arrears because I had disputed the fees in writing and no final determination had been made. The treasurer asked to see my dispute letter. I handed him a copy of the certified mail receipt and the letter. He read it, looked at Sandra, and asked why the dispute had not been brought to the board before enforcement. Sandra said she had the authority to issue emergency compliance actions. The treasurer said emergency actions still required board ratification within 10 days. He checked his notebook. He said there was no ratification record. I pulled out the third tab. I showed the tow truck work order screenshot I had taken. I explained that Sandra had attempted to have my car towed from my own driveway without a lien, without a judgment, without due process. I said the tow company had refused because they required documented legal authority. I said I had the dispatch call recorded. Marcus spoke from the corner and said that attempting to tow a vehicle without proper authority could be considered conversion or theft under state law, and that authorizing it as an HOA officer created liability for the association. Sandra said I was twisting the facts, that she had tried to enforce a legitimate debt, and that I was wasting the board's time. The compliance officer asked if Sandra had verified a lien before calling the tow company. Sandra did not answer. I said I had one more thing. I did not pull out the fourth tab yet. I said I had been told the fence was HOA property, but I had also been told the records proving that were still being processed. I said that if the fence was truly HOA property, the association should have a survey or a plat showing it. I said I had requested that survey 2 weeks ago and received nothing. I said that made me think the survey did not exist, or that it said something Sandra did not want me to see. Sandra said the survey was part of the original developer documents and that I could pay for a copy. I said state law required the HOA to provide governing documents without charge. The treasurer asked Sandra if we had a boundary survey on file. Sandra said it was in storage. The compliance officer said she had never seen it. I did not reveal the next part yet. I wanted Sandra on record first. I asked the board to verify the property line before imposing any fees or liens. Sandra said the property line was obvious, that the old fence had been there for 20 years, and that I had destroyed association infrastructure. I said if that was true, she should have no problem proving it. I said I was willing to hire a licensed surveyor to settle the question, and that if the survey showed the fence was on my property, the fees should be dismissed and my gate access restored immediately. Sandra said that was unnecessary and expensive. The treasurer said it sounded reasonable. The compliance officer agreed. Sandra looked trapped. She said fine, but I would have to pay for the survey. I said I would pay for it if the board agreed to accept the results as binding. The treasurer said yes. The compliance officer said yes. Sandra said fine. I pulled out the fourth tab. I said I had already hired a surveyor. I said he had come out Monday, located the original property pins, run the measurements, and confirmed that the fence line was entirely on my property, 6 inches inside the boundary, consistent with the recorded plat. I said I had a signed letter from the surveyor with the coordinates and a site map. I slid copies across the table to all 3 board members. I also slid a copy to Marcus. The room went silent. The treasurer read the letter. The compliance officer read the letter. Sandra read the letter and her face went red. I said the survey showed the fence was mine, not the association's, and that every violation notice Sandra had sent was based on a false premise. I said I had not destroyed HOA property because there was no HOA property on my lot. Sandra said the survey was irrelevant because the fence had always been treated as shared infrastructure. I said treatment was not ownership. I said if the HOA wanted to claim an easement or a shared maintenance agreement, they needed to show a recorded document. I said I had checked the county records and there was no easement on my property. The compliance officer asked Sandra if there was an easement. Sandra said she would have to research it. The treasurer said this was a problem, that the association had been enforcing rules based on an assumption, and that we needed to correct the record before we went any further. He said he was not comfortable imposing a lien without clear evidence of a violation. The compliance officer agreed. Sandra said I was manipulating the process and that the board was being naive. I said I had one more thing. I pulled out the 5th tab. I said I had also requested the meeting minutes from the last 5 years to see if there was any discussion of fence ownership or shared infrastructure. I said I had received no response. I said that under state law, meeting minutes were public records and the HOA had to provide them within 10 business days. I said it had been 14 days, and I had heard nothing except a demand for a $25 fee that was not legal. I said I wanted the minutes produced tonight or I would file a complaint with the state. The treasurer looked at Sandra and asked where the minutes were. Sandra said they were being digitized. The compliance officer said they should be available already. Sandra said the process was delayed. I said the delay looked like obstruction. The treasurer said he wanted to pause the hearing, review the survey, verify the records, and reconvene in 2 weeks. Sandra said that was unnecessary and that the fees should stand pending further review. The compliance officer said she agreed with the treasurer. Marcus spoke again and said that continuing to enforce fees based on a disputed property line after a licensed survey contradicted it was a liability risk for the association. He said if I had damages from the gate suspension or the tow attempt, the association could be sued. Sandra said Marcus was not a board member and had no vote. The treasurer said Marcus was right about the liability. He said he was moving to suspend all fees and enforcement actions pending a full review of the property records and a legal opinion on the boundary. The compliance officer seconded. Sandra did not vote. The motion passed 2 to abstain. I said I also wanted my gate access restored immediately. The treasurer said he would contact the management company that night. I said thank you. Sandra stood up and said the hearing was over. I stayed seated and said I had a final request. I said I wanted a correction sent to all homeowners, clarifying that the violation notice against me was issued in error and that the fees were dismissed. I said my reputation in the neighborhood had been damaged by Sandra's accusations, and I wanted the record cleared publicly. The treasurer said that was fair. Sandra said it was not necessary. The compliance officer said transparency was important. The treasurer said he would draft a correction email and send it to the board for approval. Sandra said she would not approve it. The treasurer said it only needed 2 votes. Sandra walked out of the room. Marcus and I left. I felt good but not safe. Sandra was not done. I knew she would escalate. I drove home, updated my timeline, and printed a new copy of everything. My gate code worked the next morning. I got an email from the treasurer that afternoon saying the board had voted to dismiss all fees, that a correction notice would be sent to homeowners by the end of the week, and that the association would be consulting an attorney about boundary and covenant questions. I replied thanking him. I forwarded the email to Marcus. He said to stay alert and keep documenting. 2 days later, I got a text from my neighbor across the street. She said the neighborhood group chat was blowing up with accusations that I had threatened the HOA, that I had hired an expensive lawyer, and that I was trying to dodge legitimate fees. She sent screenshots. The messages were from Sandra. Sandra had posted cropped portions of the hearing audio where I sounded confrontational, along with a claim that I had disrupted the meeting and refused to cooperate. She had left out the survey, the timeline, the tow truck, and the gate suspension. The group chat believed the crop. People were commenting that I was a problem, that new owners always cause drama, and that the HOA was just trying to keep standards. My neighbor said she knew it was one-sided and asked what really happened. I thanked her and said I would handle it. I called Marcus. He said the group chat posts were defamation, that Sandra was using her position to spread false information, and that I could demand a retraction or threaten a lawsuit. He also said the fact that she posted cropped audio from a private hearing was probably a covenant violation itself. I said I wanted to respond, but I did not want to look defensive. Marcus said to wait for the correction email from the board, then post a calm factual statement with evidence. I said okay. The correction email came out Friday. It was short. It said the board had reviewed my fence replacement, determined it was compliant with county code and located on my property, and that all prior violation notices and fees had been dismissed. It thanked homeowners for their patience. It did not name Sandra. It did not mention the survey. I posted in the group chat. I said I appreciated the board's review, that I had provided a licensed survey and a full timeline of certified notices, and that I was glad the issue was resolved. I attached a PDF of the surveyor's letter and a picture of the finished fence. I said I had followed every rule, kept every receipt, and cooperated fully. I did not mention Sandra by name. I did not have to. The group chat went quiet for an hour. Then people started commenting that they were glad it was cleared up, that the fence looked good, and that mistakes happen. A few people apologized for jumping to conclusions. Sandra did not post again. If you are enjoying this story, please hit the like button and subscribe for more HOA drama content. The next Tuesday, I got a notice in the mail saying the Quarry Ridge Community Association had scheduled a property line review for all perimeter fences, that a third-party compliance contractor would be inspecting boundaries over the next month, and that homeowners were required to provide access. I knew this was Sandra trying to find something, anything, to justify her original claims. I replied saying I would provide access, and I requested a copy of the compliance contractor's credentials and scope of work. I got no response. The contractor showed up the following Thursday. He was polite, professional, asked to see my survey, took measurements, took pictures, and left. He said everything looked correct, and he would file his report with the board. 3 weeks later, the board posted the compliance report summary. It said the contractor had reviewed 18 perimeter properties, found 3 minor setback issues that were grandfathered, and confirmed that all recent fence work was compliant. It specifically noted that my property had been surveyed and verified. It did not mention Sandra. But the next board meeting agenda included an item called Records Management Policy Review. Marcus said that was code for addressing Sandra's records, request delays, and fee gouging. I did not attend the meeting, but my neighbor did. She texted me afterward and said the board had voted to remove the records request fee, require responses within 10 business days, and assign records requests to the treasurer instead of the compliance officer. Sandra had abstained. The neighbor said Sandra looked furious. I thought it was over. Then I got an email from the management company saying the HOA meeting minutes from the past 5 years had been uploaded to the homeowner portal and were available for download. I logged in. I downloaded the files. I opened the folder for the year before I bought the house. I scrolled through the monthly meeting minutes. In March, there was a discussion about fence maintenance. The summary said the board had reviewed a proposal to transfer all perimeter fence maintenance to individual homeowners, that the proposal had passed 3-1, and that the association would no longer be responsible for perimeter fence repair or replacement. I read it twice. I checked the vote record. Sandra had voted against it. The policy had been in effect for 18 months when I moved in. Sandra knew the fences were homeowner property. She had lied from the beginning. I took a screenshot of the meeting minutes. I sent it to Marcus. He called me immediately and said this was huge, that Sandra had knowingly issued false violation notices based on a policy she voted against and knew was reversed, and that this was fraud or at least gross misconduct. He said I should forward it to the board president, who was the treasurer now after Sandra had been sidelined, and demand that Sandra be removed from any compliance or records role. I wrote the email that night. I attached the screenshot. I said I had discovered that the board had transferred perimeter fence responsibility to homeowners 18 months before my purchase, that Sandra had been aware of this policy, and that she had nonetheless claimed my fence was HOA property, issued violation notices, demanded fees, suspended my gate access, and attempted to have my car towed. I said her conduct was willful, deceptive, and damaging, and that I requested the board take immediate corrective action. I sent it certified email and regular email. I kept copies. The board president replied 2 days later. He said the board had received my email, reviewed the minutes, and scheduled a special executive session to address the matter. He said Sandra had been placed on administrative leave from all compliance and records duties pending the outcome of the session. He thanked me for bringing it to their attention. I felt the first real relief in 2 months. Marcus said administrative leave was a good sign, that boards do not take that step unless they are serious about discipline, and that Sandra was likely done. The special session happened the following week. I was not invited, but the results were posted in the board summary 3 days later. The summary said the board had reviewed allegations of misconduct related to records management and violation enforcement, that the board had found significant procedural failures, and that Sandra Taylor had resigned from her position as records custodian effective immediately. It said the board was implementing new oversight policies for compliance actions and records requests. It did not detail what Sandra had done, but everyone in the neighborhood knew. The group chat lit up. People were asking what happened. A few people said Sandra had always been overzealous. One person said she had tried to fine them for a mailbox flag color. Another said she had delayed their deck approval for 6 months over a paint shade. The stories piled up. Sandra did not post. I got a personal email from the board president the next day. He apologized on behalf of the association, said the board recognized that I had been treated unfairly and that they were reversing all records fees and reimbursing me for the $25 I had paid. He said the gate access suspension had been a violation of my rights and that the board was reviewing policies to prevent future retaliation. He said if I had any additional damages I wanted to pursue, the board would consider a settlement. I replied thanking him and saying I did not need a settlement, just a clean record and fair treatment going forward. He said I had both. I felt good. But I knew Sandra was still angry and still lived in the neighborhood. 2 weeks later, I was in my backyard trimming the new fence line when I noticed one of the orange survey stakes was missing. I had left 4 stakes in place after the surveyor finished, 1 at each corner of the property. 3 were still there. The 4th, the one closest to Sandra's side of the neighborhood, was gone. I checked the ground. There was a small hole where the stake had been, fresh dirt around it. Someone had pulled it. I took a picture. I checked my doorbell camera footage. The camera faced the front, not the back, so I had no video. I called the surveyor and asked if he had extra stakes. He said yes, he could bring one out and reset it, but he wanted to know why it was missing. I said I did not know, but I suspected tampering. He said he would document it in his file. The surveyor came out the next day. He reset the stake, took new measurements, confirmed the boundary, and took pictures of the hole. He said if the stake went missing again, I should file a police report because tampering with survey markers was a crime in Pennsylvania. I thanked him and paid his trip fee. I installed a cheap battery-powered trail camera in the back corner of the yard, hidden in a bush, aimed at the survey stakes. I did not tell anyone. 3 days later, I checked the camera. The footage showed Sandra walking into my backyard at dusk, looking around, crouching beside the reset stake, and pulling on it. The stake did not come out easily because the surveyor had pounded it deep, but she yanked it twice, and it loosened. She looked around again, then walked back toward the side path. I had her on camera. I called Marcus. He said to file a police report immediately, that tampering with a survey stake was criminal mischief at minimum, and possibly obstruction if it was tied to a property dispute. He said to bring the camera footage, the surveyor's documentation, and the timeline of harassment. I went to the local police station that afternoon. I filed a report. The officer took my statement, watched the camera footage on my phone, and said he would follow up. He asked if I wanted to press charges. I said yes. He said someone would contact me. I left a copy of the footage on a thumb drive and went home. 2 days later, a different officer came to my house. He said he had reviewed the report and the footage, that he had spoken to Sandra, and that Sandra claimed she had been checking the boundary because she believed the stake was on HOA property. He said she admitted pulling the stake but claimed it was a misunderstanding. I said the survey proved the stake was on my property, that Sandra had no authority to touch it, and that this was the latest in a 2-month pattern of harassment. The officer said he understood, that he was filing charges for criminal mischief, and that Sandra would receive a citation. He said if she touched the stakes again, I should call immediately. I thanked him. I also asked if the body camera footage she had been recording during our earlier confrontations was available. He said that was a civil records issue and I would have to request it through discovery if I filed a lawsuit. I said I would consider it. Sandra got the citation 3 days later. I know because the neighborhood group chat exploded. Someone posted a vague question about property line disputes and whether survey stakes could be moved. Another person said they had heard someone got a citation for pulling a stake. Sandra did not post. A third person said the HOA should have a clear boundary policy. The board president replied in the chat and said the association had no authority over private survey markers and that homeowners were responsible for their own boundaries. He said tampering with markers was illegal and the board did not condone it. It was not subtle. Everyone knew. The following week, the board announced a special election to fill Sandra's vacant records custodian position. Nominations were open for 10 days. I did not nominate anyone. I just wanted it over. A retired accountant from the other side of the development nominated himself. He won unopposed. The board also posted a new records request policy, written in plain language, with no fees, a 10-day response window, and an appeal process if requests were denied. It was everything Marcus had said a good policy should look like. I felt like I had won something real. But the final piece came from an unexpected place. The city building department sent me a letter saying they had received a complaint about my fence, that an inspector had reviewed the complaint and my permit application, and that the inspector had determined the fence was compliant and no further action was needed. The letter included a copy of the complaint. It was filed by Sandra 2 days before she resigned, claiming I had built the fence without a permit and over the height limit. The complaint was false. I had not needed a permit for a replacement, and the fence was well under 6 feet. But the letter also included the inspector's notes. The notes said the inspector had visited the property, measured the fence, reviewed the survey, and found no violation. The notes also said the inspector had contacted the complainant to inform her the complaint was unfounded and that filing false complaints could result in penalties. The inspector had called Sandra. Sandra had been told to stop. I added the letter to my binder. I now had a paper trail that showed Sandra had lied to the HOA, lied to the tow company, tampered with survey markers, and filed a false complaint with the city. I had certified mail receipts, a surveyor's letter, police reports, camera footage, meeting minutes, and an inspector's clearance. I did not need to do anything else. The record spoke for itself. The next board meeting was in November. I attended. So did Marcus. The room was full. The agenda included a report on the compliance review and the new records policy. The board president summarized the changes, thanked homeowners for their patience during the transition, and said the association was committed to fair and transparent enforcement. Then he opened the floor for homeowner comments. I stood up. I said I appreciated the board's work to correct the records and compliance processes. I said I had been subject to false accusations, retaliatory enforcement, and harassment, and I was grateful the board had taken it seriously. I said I hoped the new policies would prevent anyone else from experiencing what I went through. I said I had documentation of everything, and if anyone wanted to see the timeline or the evidence, I was happy to share it. I sat down. The room was silent for a moment. Then a few people clapped. The board president thanked me. Sandra was not there. A week later, I got an email from Sandra. It was short. It said she was writing to apologize for the confusion and inconvenience related to the fence matter, that she had relied on incorrect information about the property line, and that she regretted the dispute. It did not say she lied. It did not say she harassed me. It did not mention the gate suspension, the tow truck, the stakes, or the false city complaint. But it was signed and dated, and I knew the board had required her to send it as part of her resignation terms. I forwarded it to Marcus. He said it was a weak apology, but it was on the record. I saved it in the binder. The final showdown happened in December. The board scheduled a boundary walk for all perimeter properties to finalize the compliance review. The walk was led by the third-party compliance contractor and a licensed surveyor the association had hired to verify property lines across the development. Homeowners were invited to attend. I attended. So did Sandra. The surveyor started at the north end of the neighborhood and worked south. When he reached my property, he set up his equipment, located the pins, ran the measurements, and confirmed the boundary matched the survey I had provided. He said my fence was 6 inches inside the line, fully compliant and correctly placed. He marked the findings on his map. Sandra was standing 10 feet away with her arms crossed. The surveyor asked if there were any questions. Sandra said the old fence had been farther out and that moving it in had changed the drainage. The surveyor said drainage was not part of the boundary review. Sandra said the association should have been consulted. The surveyor said the fence was on private property and the association had no jurisdiction. Sandra walked away. The contractor finished his walk 2 days later. He submitted his report to the board. The board posted a summary. It said all perimeter fences had been verified, that 3 properties had minor grandfathered setbacks, and that no current violations were found. It said the association had updated its boundary maps and would provide copies to homeowners on request. It said the review was complete. It thanked homeowners for their cooperation. I downloaded the updated map. My property line was marked in green. The fence was marked in blue, 6 inches inside the line, exactly where I had built it. I printed a copy and added it to the binder. That same week, the board held its annual meeting and election. Sandra did not run for re-election. She did not attend. The board president was re-elected. The treasurer was re-elected. The compliance officer was replaced by the new records custodian, the retired accountant. The meeting included a review of the year. The president mentioned the records policy update, the boundary review, and the compliance process improvements. He said the board had learned from mistakes and was focused on fair enforcement and transparency. He did not name Sandra, but he did say the association had issued a formal retraction of prior violation notices that were based on incorrect property information and that affected homeowners had been notified. I had received the retraction letter 2 days earlier. It was addressed to me, signed by the board president, and it said the association recognized that the violation notices issued in September were based on erroneous boundary assumptions, that the fees had been dismissed, and that my record was clear. It apologized for the inconvenience. I filed it in the binder. The group chat stayed quiet about Sandra for a few weeks. Then someone posted a question about whether board members could be recalled. Another person said it did not matter because Sandra had already resigned. A third person said they had seen Sandra's house was for sale. I checked the real estate listings. It was true. Sandra's house was listed, priced to move, and the description said the seller was relocating for personal reasons. I did not know if the harassment, the citation, the resignation, or the public exposure had pushed her out, but the result was the same. She was leaving. The neighborhood was done with her. A few days before Christmas, I got a message from my neighbor across the street. She said a video clip from the November board meeting had been shared in a private neighborhood chat, the one Sandra was not in anymore. The clip was my homeowner comment, where I had stood up and thanked the board and offered to share my documentation. Someone had screen recorded it and posted it with a caption that said, "This is what accountability looks like." The clip had been shared to other local HOA groups. People were commenting that they wished their boards were as responsive, that documentation was everything, and that standing up to bad enforcement was worth it. My neighbor said I had become a minor legend in the local HOA drama community. I laughed. I thanked her. I did not share the clip myself, but I did not ask anyone to take it down either. Marcus called me the day after Christmas. He said he had heard from a friend who worked in HOA management that Quarry Ridge had quietly settled a complaint Sandra had filed against the board, claiming they had defamed her by posting the correction emails. The settlement terms were confidential, but Marcus's friend said the association had agreed to remove any reference to Sandra's name from public communications, and Sandra had agreed to drop the complaint and not disparage the association. Marcus said it was a clean exit for both sides, and that Sandra probably took a small payout to go away quietly. I said I did not care as long as she was gone. He said she was. I spent New Year's cleaning out my binder. I scanned every document, every receipt, every picture, every email, and uploaded it all to a cloud drive. I labeled the folder HOA Dispute 2024 and set it to private. I kept the physical binder in my office closet, just in case. But I have not opened it since. My gate code works. My fence stands straight. My property line is verified, mapped, and recorded. The HOA sends monthly newsletters now, written by the new records custodian, and they are polite, clear, and fair. I have not received a single violation notice since November. The board president waves when he drives by. The neighborhood feels different, lighter, like a weight was lifted. I saw Sandra once more, in late January, loading boxes into a moving truck in her driveway. I was driving past on my way to work. She saw me. I saw her. Neither of us waved. I kept driving. The house sold in February. A young couple with a dog moved in. They introduced themselves at the mailbox. They said they had heard the neighborhood was well managed and the HOA was reasonable. I said it was getting better. They smiled. I did not tell them the whole story. Some things are better left in the binder. The compliance contractor who had done the boundary walk sent me a follow-up survey in March asking about my experience with the review process. I filled it out honestly. I said the contractor had been professional, thorough, and fair. I said the process had been necessary, and I appreciated the clarity it provided. I did not mention Sandra. The contractor sent a thank you note and said the HOA had hired him for an annual review contract. I was glad. Oversight works. In April, the board sent an email announcing a new dispute resolution policy. Any homeowner with a complaint about a violation notice could request a pre-hearing review with the board president and an independent third party before fees or enforcement actions were imposed. The policy said the goal was to resolve disputes early, fairly, and transparently. I read it twice. It was exactly the kind of policy that would have stopped Sandra's harassment in the first week. I replied to the board president and said I thought the policy was excellent and I appreciated the board's commitment to fairness. He replied and said my situation had been the catalyst for the change, and he thanked me for holding the association accountable. I have lived in Quarry Ridge for a year and a half now. My fence is still standing. My property line is still verified. My record is still clean. I go to work every day, pass my background checks, and sleep fine at night. The HOA holds monthly meetings and I attend a few, just to stay informed. The new board is careful, procedural, and boring in the best way. There is no drama. There are no false accusations. There are no surprise tow trucks or gate suspensions. It is exactly what an HOA should be. Looking back, I think about the moment Sandra said, "You will pay the fee." Then you will pay the fee about the fee. Standing on my sidewalk with the tow truck idling and her body camera recording. I think about how confident she was, how certain that her authority was absolute and my resistance was futile. I think about the surveyor's letter, the meeting minutes, the trail camera footage, the inspector's clearance, and the compliance report. I think about the board meeting where I stood up and offered to share my documentation, and the quiet that followed. I think about the correction email, the retraction letter, the apology, the resignation, and the for sale sign. I think about how a paper trail, a calm voice, and a willingness to stand firm can dismantle a tyrant, one receipt at a time. Sandra tried to bury me with fees, lies, and retaliatory enforcement. Instead, a third-party compliance report that cleared me completely forced the board to see the truth. The HOA sent a correction email retracting the smear, and Sandra was forced to apologize on the record in front of the room. She lost her position before the next vote, not because I fought dirty, but because I built a timeline she could not escape. Every rule she tried to weaponize came back to protect me. Every lie she told became evidence. Every threat she made became proof of intent. The insurer email saying stop never came, but the city inspector, the surveyor, the police, and the board all said the same thing in the end. Stop. I still have the binder. I still have the camera footage. I still have the certified mail receipts, and the surveyor's letter, and the meeting minutes, and the correction email. I do not need them anymore, but I keep them anyway, because documentation is the only thing that stands between fairness and chaos in a place like this. And if another Sandra ever tries to pull the same move, I will be ready. But I do not think it will happen again. The neighborhood learned. The board learned, and I learned that the best revenge is not anger or escalation, but a clean paper trail and the patience to let the truth do the work. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.